report out of closed session, please, Mark?
We had three items that are come out. One is that we approved a maternity leave. We allowed a classified person to, on the maternity, we had 2 teachers, a Willie Brown that we approved, and we approved a teacher to use accumulated sick leave for a sick family member.
Thank you.
And the D item was a discussion by the board and subject to confidentiality.
Perfect. And Ken, flag salute. Mr. Cully, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see, we're at
Presentation.
So we have Lavita.
And
Yes.
I just come on up. You don't need to give a big presentation.
okay.
We got your packet. They
Okay.
looked through your packet, all that stuff. Don't worry, you don't have a big speech or anything.
Grab my packet.
You don't have like an hour acceptance speech or anything.
It's nice to see you all. We were just together in the spring with our rechartering, and we're having a good year. And last year, even though we were busy rechartering and getting our WUSD midterm accreditation, we managed to grow a little bit. You know, we feel pretty good about our academic growth. It's just kind of steady and incremental. And we're having a good year this year. Even a few more kids, which is nice.
And we have a good working relationship. She calls me, I call her. I went out to their event that they always have in the fall. It's a nice activity and good group of family and kids. And,
Yeah.
so,
I really commend Mark for coming. It's his 4th year, showing up. It means a lot. And then the kids, I tell them that superintendent's going to be there and they better know their lines. Anyways,
Well,
good
thank you very much.
food, good people. They're living by their charter rules and doing the things they need to do. So we continue to have a good relationship, and we look over their financial records, and they struggle with the same things we do with getting stuff from the state and getting it back and getting it in. And
Okay. Thank you.
sure. Any questions? Yeah.
I have just one on the page 25. It was talking about all the professional development for your staff. So are those like, I just want to know, you pay your teachers to go to those, or they volunteer to do that?
It's a mixed bag. Some of the things are paid, and some of them we pay for the training, and they go, like in the summer trainings, we don't pay hourly for that. We pay their room and board or whatever it is that they have.
Plus the cost of the conference,
all
but then
that.
they give their
And
time.
their food.
Oh, okay.
And gas.
Yeah. And the computer programs that they were into, those they just sort of do on their own time. Do you have like in-service days in your?
We do a lot of in-service stuff.
Okay.
The webinars, you mean?
Yeah, aren't those on computers?
Yeah,
Where they
indeed.
sit? Yeah.
Yes, those are generally, as far as paid time, those are usually paid time because it's
During the school day?
within the school, yeah.
Their hours,
absolutely.
that is.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
they have a lot of flex time on Friday to get some of those things
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
and then we try to maximize our meeting time. So we're meeting once a week somehow, you know, so.
Well, it looked like a lot in the
Oh,
staff
yeah?
development for classified staff was
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
strong looking, and I thought that was a good deal. I just was curious,
Thanks.
you know, how they came about
Thank you.
being done. I have one more question. if
Oh,
that's
yes?
okay. You know, on the next page, it also talked about your immunizations, you know?
Yeah.
Did that happen just because it's a new group of people, or did your school kind of take a concerted effort to say,
Yeah.
you know, it's a good idea to immunize your kids?
It's really a parent choice thing.
Yeah.
So we're saying you can't come to on-site classes unless you have immunizations, and we're pushing that.
Oh, okay.
So, and a few families they want it so bad, they're doing immunizations.
Oh, okay. Well, just
But we're
drop
just seeing that
so
more
much.
people, I mean, that's what's happening, is more people are coming immunized.
That's good.
But we really want to support families that
Choosing.
have that choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, it just like it doubled last year, and I just was curious.
It
if it's-
did, we were
That was
shocked,
a big
actually.
deal, or at least in my head.
Yeah.
And I just,
Yeah,
I thought,
it's
wow.
surprising.
yeah, I didn't know if you'd
I
changed
know.
the rule a touch, or if people were just a little more into, yeah, I'll take care of this. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anything
Well
else?
done, nice report.
Okay.
Very detailed and color and everything.
Oh, yeah, we love that color.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
thanks,
you,
Mark.
Andrew.
We're at Willits Elementary Charter.
You're our next contestant.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Charlene Bretter. I'm the new director of Willits Elementary Charter. This report is from last year, and so Kara McLeod was the director then. We are successfully continuing our full enrollment with 142 students. We continue the same program as before, inquiry-based learning. Everyone learns Spanish every day, and there's art once a week in Spanish. And we have music every day nearly, and we have a strong Native American program. We're doing one activity every month this year. And Mark came to visit our school and to look at our reading program.
So, again, we have a great working relationship. There's things they need, there's things I need. And we share information back and forth. And she came and we went through Blosser and looked at Blosser Elementary and looked at what they do and the program they have. So, yeah.
Is the reading program something similar?
Yes. We have, and right this year, we're working on response to intervention. So we're noticing a lot of kids, especially like in kindergarten and first grade, are falling behind. So giving them the extra support. So we're focusing a lot on that. And our goal this year is to make that consistent through all the grades. Because we do have some fifth graders or fourth graders who are reading at a second grade level. And so the same supports that you would give a second grade student are so appropriate for those struggling readers. So we're working on developing an entire program that is not just ad hoc, but actually stretches through the school and is more stable.
So you mentioned some kids were falling behind. Have you identified reasons for those?
These are kindergarten kids who are still struggling with identifying the L sound, for example, or they can remember that L is a L but not L. And so we take them 10 minutes a day and review. So we've seen progress with doing that, so we continue to individual attention.
Thank you.
Yes.
Your students that you have listed, you know, I figure a 16.9 is really 17 kids and a 16.2 is really 16 kids?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's what I figured. And then, do you do special ed through our district?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so your kids are bussed over and,
No, we
No.
have people come over and help us.
oh, go and see them?
So,
Oh, okay.
the psychologist comes, so if we have any issues with that, she's helping to do that, well, she's doing the testing.
Oh, okay,
We actually made an arrangement a year ago with,
oh, okay.
before you got here, Jason and Eric and I met. In fact, Jennifer was there and we talked about the employment of their teachers. It was really awkward. We would hire the teacher for them, but they did all their work there and were literally supervised by them.
Yeah.
And so now they hire their special education teachers.
Oh,
But we provide the services like psychologists and other things. And if they have a
Speech,
student,
yeah,
Yeah.
speech, eye, vision.
yeah, if they have a student who's beyond the scope of what their program is, then they do have to come to Willits Unified. And that's dictated by their IEP.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there are students who technically could go there, but if their IEP, if they don't have that program, you know, it's not reasonable to expect that they put one in there. And so that's where we work together on special ed, and Kelly works with them very well. And,
She comes to our
yeah.
meetings too.
But it's a much better situation where they essentially employ their own special ed teachers, so we don't have that mix-up of they're our employee. We're doing evaluations on somebody we virtually never saw. and
Right.
It just didn't work.
Okay, and do you have like a specific English language learning class once a day or what, I don't mean a whole class, but I
They
mean
get
like.
pulled out at a
They-
certain
oh,
time,
okay.
and then they get specific, we're trying to build it on the curriculum now.
Mhm.
So third grade, for example, is studying plants, then that English language support would be with the same curriculum to support them in doing that curriculum in English in the class.
Oh, okay.
That makes good sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's more scaffolding for them, and they can participate better.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Jennifer, it must be you.
Yeah,
You're
that's
the- You're
me.
the survivor.
Last but not least. So good to see everyone. My name is Jennifer Lockwood, and
You're welcome.
this is my 6th year as a director, and we continue our focus on the arts and sciences. We're 6th through 12th grade, and our high school is a college program, and our middle school is, middle school. Some of the highlights, we just celebrated our 20th year, so that's a big deal. We're having a big variety show celebration, and so everyone's definitely invited to that. Some of the things we did last year, we started a very small, grassroots sports program. So we started with soccer, and we just started basketball, literally the other day, and our kids, I just left, our kids are over at Bechtel actually playing, so it's in their t-shirts with Sharpie numbers written on the back. So it's very, we're just scrimmaging, we're not in any league or anything, but they're having a good time. I think they're probably getting killed right now, but that's okay. It's all about the fun and having a good time. So that's kind of new for us, is to start having two teams going on is for the charter school, a big deal. Some of the things that happened last year, we got a Civic Learning Award for merit for our social studies program. We competed at the Henry Count Blair Shakespeare Festival. We do a lot of, our focus is a lot of theater and drama and arts and ceramics. So like I said, our typical focus has been the arts, not sports. What other things happen? Some things that are coming up, we are building a multi-purpose room we're gonna be able to have more sports and theater space, and that's gonna be in our garden area, and we're gonna sort of transplant our garden to another part of the school. So we're just growing programs and adding new things, new curriculum, and some new teachers. Some of the areas we continue to struggle with are the area of math. I think that seems to be county-wide or California statewide, right?
Nationwide.
But we're continuing, trying new curriculum, and we're doing PLCs, and all of our teachers have agreed to focus on math. So we're really trying to tackle that this year. It seems like we're always trying to tackle it, but our strong focus is on math, so.
And we work well together as well. We often talk about students because we exchange students periodically, and so
Yeah.
we make sure we have a conversation with each other so we don't get surprises and know what to do. The same thing with special ed exists with the upper charter, is that they employ their teacher, but if they did have a student who had high needs, they would need to come to our program. But they have their own teacher, and she does the evaluation and takes care of those needs. It just works better for both.
Yeah, we hired a new teacher this year, and she's amazing. I think she's in a little bit of shock because we're up to 22 students out of 120, so our percentage of special education is extremely high, and probably part of our problem with math and, just students struggling with learning challenges. But yeah, students with higher needs, yeah, we would find the right program that matches their needs. Any questions? Or, yeah.
On the SELT scores that you do, you didn't post them or anything, but do you know, kind of off the top of your head, that there seems to be growth each year, or you're not having the same students, or what are you
Yeah, we
finding?
have, it seems to be a minimal amount of students. And I don't know why, it's just maybe because of the focus of our program, I'm not sure. We certainly welcome all students. Just our SELT scores, our students have grown in that area. It's an inclusive program, so they're learning the language within the general ed classroom. So we don't have ELD classes or programs like that. So There is growth because I think that the immersion, you know, in the general ed classrooms, but it was only a few students that we even tested
Yeah, it looked
last
like
year.
5, it said.
Yeah, it's minimal, right.
Oh, okay.
It's
And-
not a high enough number to create a pie chart for.
Yeah, I
it.
think
They-
I could see that, yeah.
10 or 11, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And then I was just curious, on expenses, your certificated salaries and your classified salaries are almost the same? Not as far as hourly wage, but as far as how much money it takes out of your budget. So can you kind of explain that to me?
Sure, because we did increase our classified staff. We
It looked
added
like-
a school registrar, we added a full-time computer tech person, and they also teach classes though. Our school registrar teaches a makeup class, our computer tech person teaches dance, and so, I mean, if you ever want to come visit, I'll happy to, it's just everyone does multiple things. I teach a class if I could, but I can't, too busy. So, there was an increase in classified, but they're doing a lot of different things.
So then the certificated salaries are mostly those who have credentials or your
Right.
2 or 3
They are the
that
ones
see.
who have credentials.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The 2 or 3 that you have that seem to be getting their full credentials.
Right, we have.
They're a part of that certificated, but everyone else is classified, is that how you do it?
Yeah, they're only certificated if they have to at least have a full credential.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, they have to at least, or a short-term staff permit or something of that nature. And we do have a number of those,
Yeah.
especially our, you know.
A bulk of their electives are considered in the classified pay scale because they don't
Right.
hold a credential.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
so-
that's kind of what I was getting
Okay,
at, is
yeah.
how you're covering
And
all of that.
In a small school, they do multiple things. I mean,
Yeah,
the job descriptions would be difficult to put together for them because
Right.
they do multiple things, but
Yeah, we try to.
what you're
list it
looking
all.
at is the program they have. Unless you're credentialed, you're not on the teachers.
okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to know.
There
The
is a
waiver
new
types
law, I
and
guess we have 5 years to get everybody credentialed, but the elected teachers can have CTE credentials, so we're starting to work on that process.
Oh, okay, it'll be shorter.
Yeah, so everyone will be credentialed in a 5-year period, because that's a new state law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted
Just
to put it all
more.
together.
But they're excited about getting credentials, you know, and moving forward in their career, so.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate it.
We're at item E, D, excuse me, budget approval.
You want to do that one?
Sure, this is just the letter that we get at each budget cycle stating that the county office fiscal department has reviewed our LCAP and our budget adoption, and that they concur with our certifications on that, and that they've approved the LCAP.
And I'm most pleased about the last part, that they approved the LCAP. I got through my freshman English assignment there and made it say what they wanted it to say.
Okay. Any discussion on item D? Okay, moving on, item E, Jendi Corsi Communications
Yeah.
Consultant.
I was going to have Jendi here tonight. Jendi got shoulder surgery today. Fortunately, it's on her left. She's right-handed and she's a writer. But Jendi is the person I've used for probably a couple of years now. She helps me with communications out, and she specializes in advertising and marketing, that sort of thing. In regards to the bond, it's a very simplistic approach for us. I'm not going to be producing these colored pamphlets that we send all over town, because that's not really our issue. Our issue is not making the case for why we need to fix our facilities. Our issue is how do we do it, and are people willing to pay the cost of it? It's not, do we need to fix stuff? So I think our communications is far simpler. I'm not really interested, I know that Adam Bauer talked about bringing in a communication company from, I don't remember where they're from, somewhere Sacramento or that area. Jendi knows our district. She knows everything about our district. When I write letters to the paper and all that stuff, She's my review person, and she's who I write it with. And then once we get it, then Trina's my grammar checker and all that. And so the three of us kind of put those together. But Jendi knows the district. I don't want somebody who doesn't know the district and come with some boilerplate program. Jendi will do it on a time and materials basis, so we don't have some big giant contract we gotta sign. And I think we wanna keep it simple, because our issue is really very simple. We're doing a fix and repair, and we need to let people know that it's a need and why it's a need. And let them go to the polls and make their decision. And we move on from whatever that decision is. So, Jendi's a great person. I'm not worried about cost overruns or big contracts or having to teach somebody what Willits is about and what it's like. So, she lives in Ukiah. Her husband's a math teacher at Ukiah, and so she knows the school business as well.
Perfect.
So, and I'm just giving you that as an informational thing, how I'm going to deal with communications. I've done 200+ million in school bonds in my career, so this isn't a new trip for me. This is a unique trip, for sure, but it's not a new one.
Any board comment, discussion? Since we're talking a little bit about the bond issue, I'd like to do a little bit of shout out to Willits News for awesome article on the bond stuff. Very accurate, very much appreciated, clear, concise, to the point. So hopefully the general public can see what we're up against, and very much appreciated. Next item on the agenda, WTA.
Hello. Well, we're working on raising awareness of the bond issue and getting support for it within the teacher community. In January, we're going to start getting petitions signed for schools and communities first initiative to get that put on the ballot.
Are they looking for November on that? Are they looking for the November?
For the
ballot?
November
Big
2020.
miss March already.
Yeah. So we're working to build awareness and knowledge within a 100-member body. The doghouse closed, and so none of the teachers got into the doghouse last month.
I was going to ask you about it. I forgot to ask you about that. You guys shut the doghouse down.
I guess, I kept going over there and it wasn't open, so we didn't get to promote much that last month, but we're gonna do Imagination Depot this month.
Yeah.
We're getting some WTA posters and stickers made, and we're gonna go around and ask businesses in the community to post them in their windows and just build awareness of who the teachers in our community are and the things that we're doing. We have an activity in January working with the Willits Community Theater. We're gonna get a bunch of teachers to go over there and help them clean out their 2 storage containers of costumes from the last 50 years. So, just doing things in the community. I said Imagination Depot's our business of the month this month, okay. We had a holiday party. It was the first ever, Willits teachers. So out of 96 members, we had 39 and guests show up. We rented out the Willits Center for the Arts, had it catered by Roland Doe Bakery, and a DJ, and a good time was had by all. So happy teachers make for positive learning environments, which is good for our kids.
There were no mishaps in the paper that I saw.
No,
so this one-
no photos that we had to worry about. That was good.
Maybe next year.
Okay. Now, the biggie for me at least, and I think it's a biggie for a lot of teachers, is working on the calendars for the next 3 years. Mark gave us his suggested projections for it, and I shared that with the teachers, and they had a lot of input to add to that. Well, Mr. Worsted has very, very graciously allowed us time to meet and have a committee and talk about it and decide the pros and cons of different things, and he's open and receptive to hearing what teachers may be requesting. So I'm really excited about that. You don't seem to feel like it's a big deal to you, but it seems to be like that to a lot of teachers. So what you're doing is building goodwill, and this is really important. I'm very happy about that, just continuing our relationship. So
I'm going to be here no matter what we do on the calendar, so those are irrelevant. And yeah, there's a lot of things we need to discuss.
Them,
yeah.
so thank you.
And like I told you, you'll never get consensus. You're going to have to go with majority.
But just feeling heard is huge.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Good.
That was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that we're making a strong effort to work together to a common purpose. Dan?
Good evening. Things are going good. Everybody's plugging along, keeping the facilities running, and that seems to be good. We're working with HR right now on trying to get a substitute situation going on, because we do have some issues with trying to keep subs, because a lot of our hour times are not really high, so it's hard to get somebody to sit around for a couple hours. So we're trying to work with the HR to get creative on how to solve that. And I was wondering if I could talk to Mr. Chavez about that someday, because maybe you've seen some scenarios in other districts that might help us out and how to work with that, if that's all right.
Sure.
And so that's, if we can, try to work on plugging those holes, would be great, because when we get staff out, we end up with, other staff filling in to try to help that out, because it's hard to keep a pool of subs. And our jobs aren't the greatest paying around, and the sub scale's a little bit less than our scale, so we're working on that. And I think we'll work something out, I hope.
So the issue's typically short periods of time, that you need people that it's difficult to fill those?
Yeah, a lot of them are short period, and the jobs are like spread out. So to have an individual for a spread out job, we're kind of thinking out of the box that maybe we could have a full-time person that's just kind of a floater around to help out situations. And there's always a need for them, but we got to see how it all works and get creative on it, and just try to work on that.
There is seldom a day when we don't need a sub in some place, either paras, custodial, maintenance. The problem is there's such a difference in skill set, and there's also a difference in time. If I'm a custodial maintenance sub, well, I need you to be here for a night shift Wednesday, but I need you here in the morning because somebody else is out. And so it's not really just as simple, because we've had the conversation, Nikki and Laura and I have had this conversation about having a permanent sub-type person. The problem is they would have to be super flexible, because it would be really difficult. I had 3 people out at Sherwood this week. I went up and subbed. I had Heather Mia came over from Brookside. We were really reeling to get everybody in place. And so it's a difficult thing. In CSEA, our sub list is almost non-existent. In teachers, we don't have enough of them, but we at least have some teacher subs. Seldom do we go without a teacher not having a sub, unless we have something really unusual going on. But in the CSEA world, the problem is that when you don't have a one-on-one aid for this child, you don't have any subs, it's a problem. And it's a problem all day at that school for somebody. And so, yeah, that's a real problem. And Dan's right, it's not a super high paying wage, and it's also, the skill sets are very different. You have to be able to do PROACT training if you have a child with special needs, but I can't also have somebody else who can do electrical work for us. Those aren't the same people. So.
It would be creative, thinking out of the box to try to make something work.
Yep.
And everything's doable, we just gotta figure out how to get it. And like you said, Robert's been in a lot of schools, maybe there's instances where that happened. Mark's been there, so we'll work on it, see what we can do.
Thank you.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Board comments. We'll start with Paul.
Oh, okay. Well, I have been pretty busy the last 3 or 4 weeks, but I've been to Brookside a couple of times and Blosser a couple of times, and I read about I really appreciate your letters, Maria, because I had heard that there were students who surpassed the AR level, and then they would get to go to a movie. And it just happens that one of my nieces is off to that, and she was absolutely ecstatic. So that was a real big deal. I haven't heard her that excited about school in a couple of years, so I'm impressed. I was curious about that, if you could tell me today or some other time. They make up their own goals, and then okay, that's good. That's what I really needed to know.
Renaissance Learning is an online learning program, well, it's an online tracking program. They read the book, they take the tests that are in the AR program, and it gives them, they start off the school with a diagnostic sort of mostly comprehension test, and it places them at a particular level, and it gives them a goal to proceed,
they need to
depending
reach
on their level, and and so they get points for the books that they read. Each book has a number of points, and they have a certain number of points that they have to complete every 6. Oh gosh.
I think it's 6 weeks.
Every 6 weeks.
Okay. She seemed to think it was like months, but then I reminded her she's only been in school for like 3 of them, so it hasn't been a whole lot of them. But I knew all about the AR program, I just didn't know who was in charge of setting the goal,
So it's 3 goals every trimester, so I'm thinking every 4 weeks they meet their goal, or they don't meet their goal.
Okay.
And so the program itself sets the goal for them.
Yeah, well, that was a real good thing. It's kind of remotivated her, and that's good. I give a lot of credit to middle school teachers and people who are involved there, because for me, that's the hardest of them all. And it was just a big deal. And then I haven't been to too much else. Everything I've heard lately has been going okay. I did get some good feedback about the bond from only about 4 people that had been very, very adamant against it. And when I explained to them the progression, because the Willits Weekly also had a nice explanation. So they seemed a lot more impressed with the idea that it's not like Ukiah is doing, or or like this district did a number of years ago, so that was a big deal. But the one big thing was, if there was going to be any kind of community meeting where people could have input on the list of things that needed to have a priority different than the priority list that I had gotten from here and that was in the paper. Because there were some concerns about some things people thought were certainly a lot more immediate need than other things. And I said, I don't know, I knew that you made the list, but I didn't know if you made it or it came from that one years and years ago and was just modified or whatever. I knew that the classes that are new are different, or that would be new, would be different, like the health, it's not home ec, it was a culinary class. But some of the other things that had a lot more probably to do with maintenance than setting up new things, why they weren't in the first batch instead of the second batch and stuff like that. Anyway, so when you find out, I'd like it to be known so that I could pass that on. In my mind, it will help the votes to be yes over the ones that I currently know about that aren't quite swung that way yet, to be able to have input.
When we put that out, I just said, this is a suggested list. It's certainly not cast in stone.
Well, I didn't think so.
We're going to have citizen oversight committee. We're also, we don't even know the dollar figure yet it would generate.
Yeah.
But I put on there.
Well, it had amounts.
Right, I put a $3 million on there. It could be more. I hope it's not less, but it could be more. And if it is, I would consider that contingency usually. When I do a construction project, I usually, in my mind, have a 20% contingency in my head because, like I said, when you tear the floor up in the high school main wing, you don't know what you're going to find underneath.
Plus your termites,
But those are suggested ideas.
Oh,
The
okay.
board's gonna decide on the priority of what they want to have done. The
Oh.
question is, do you do that before the election or afterwards?
The difficulty if we do it too soon is that, as we know, conditions just can change at such a rapid pace.
Yeah.
And I think as we discussed at that last meeting, we want to be able to be responsive if, for instance, the boiler or something like that goes, that we need to be able to restructure those priorities to deal with emergencies and things.
We're about to get our 40 days of rain, 40 rainy days and
Yeah.
things, so we'll find out where a lot of our roof problems are here right directly. And I know like the last year you taught, you had a rainfall in your room
Yeah, we did.
over at Woodside. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's stuff we just don't know. And we will address that, because those are obvious things. Student needs always supersede things like, can we put a culinary room together? That's a nice to do, not a need to do.
Okay.
I would really like to do that. I think it's the one program we really need at the high school. But again, that's not gonna supersede the roof that's leaking or those
Yeah.
kind of things. And you guys are gonna make that decision. You're gonna say, Mark, here's our list, here's our priority, knock them down.
I would hope that with the language of the bond, with citizen oversight, that a lot of these things will be vetted through that process.
Right.
And is it correct that those decisions would happen at each stage of the funding? So
Right.
it's not like we would set it at the very beginning for the whole life of the bonds. It would be anytime a new set is issued, then decisions are made about that batch of funds.
If we go out and we have a 4-year, 3-year window before we issue the next set, we would say that, and Adam will give us a number, but he may say you're gonna have 3.4 million. And so we would use that as our figure to say, okay, here's where we gotta get to. Let's go out and prioritize our projects, because some, the price may have gone up or gone down on. I don't know how many would go down, but it's possible. And so we have to get the bids, and we'd say, here's where we're at, and let's get these done. That's why I think you want to be conservative and then have a 20% contingency, not just because of that, but bids might vary. And, like I said, we have no idea when we open up a 1929 buildings floor what we're gonna find.
Okay, just then to understand it better, I guess we all know some of the people who are on the oversight committee, and not all of them felt as if they were as understood or well heard or whatever as they had wanted to be. So when that happens this year, the oversight committee, or if the bond passes in next year, then the oversight committee they will be representing the community more and have input to the board, telling the board what things should be taken care of first, or you'd make an announcement more or less, or publicize when there would be meetings so that people would come and take care of themselves.
They would be open public meetings, but you would have, my understanding of is you do like monthly updates
Okay.
of here's what we're doing, here's the projects, here's how the bids came in, here's the priority from the board. Certainly that priority, if you want to persuade the board to say, do this before you do that, I can't do that for them. I can't sit in a meeting and say, you know what, I like your idea better than what the list the board's already approved is. I don't have that authority.
And if I recall correctly, I believe that there's a specific legal composition of
There is.
who, the members who are part of that oversight committee. And so I think that group has to meet certain requirements, like you said, meeting a certain amount of times and the types
Yeah.
of things that they're required to.
I knew that those rules existed, but I know that sometimes that doesn't work out. And, we've had that problem with site councils and things like that. And so, as some sort of safeguard, and some people just don't like to be committed to a meeting, but they'll show up to once or twice to say what they think and walk out again, But I just needed to make sure that, those things will all be in place. And personally, I think you might consider something similar to that sooner than a ballot than after, just because sometimes that will sway a person if they, I mean, you know, most people are still thinking of what's happened to them already. And in order to remind them that, you know, change occurs, that,
So
you know,
you're
it'd be
thinking that
handy.
citizen oversight committee should be established before the vote?
I would think so, but even then, if you can't get all the people, I mean, it's like site councils, you want a majority of parents, or a majority of teachers, or a majority of this or that. Well, teachers don't really, I mean, they're sort of, they have to be placed on the committee, and that's, somebody in their grade level has to, or department has to do that. But as far as parents covering certain areas of the community, that doesn't always happen, or representing areas of the community. And I mean, it's like the deal we just had for, or we're gonna have rather, on is that education for English learners. You can't always fill those positions, and that's what I need to know, that there's some sort of safeguard. Because to say, well, you're one of the people on the committee, that's easy to say and hard to get.
Well, that's kind of the beauty too of the bond we're doing. We're not beholden to say, we're gonna build a $7 million science wing behind the high school that now's a vacant parking lot.
Yes.
Okay, we don't have those obligations. What we have is a fix and repair bond on existing stuff we have. And so we're not beholden to the fact that we gotta drop money into architects and engineers and DSA and all those people to start doing drawings and all that stuff for us. So we really have total control with some issues, but almost total control of what projects we go after and when we go after them.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the beauty of a fix and repair bond. And the language is written generically enough to say that we can fix just about anything. Now, we can't take the money and use it for operational costs, but we can use the money for anything fix and repair. And so that's, I think, the oversight, whether it goes before or after, it doesn't matter to me. I'd be glad to host a meeting next week to talk about what do you want to do first. Because I really want that to be my problem. What are we going to do first?
Dan, you have a comment?
Yeah, a comment on the, so when people get together or everybody says, well, we should do this, I gotta kind of throw it out like, has anybody ever had a transmission done in your car? When you take the transmission out to replace the clutch, when you're in there and you drop that out, you need to also change the seals and do the bearings and things like that before you put that big thing back in there, because if you have to do those things later, you kind of have to tear apart what you just did. And so there is a little dance on a lot of this that needs to happen too. So it's not as cut and dry as just putting shingles on a roof.
Right.
There are some of the incidental things that will come into play and all that stuff.
And that's the 20% I'm talking about.
Yeah, and so those all have to be considered when the committee of people want to talk and try to arrange these things. It's not necessarily what needs to be done, it's an understanding somewhat of how, what needs to be done, how it's done. That's pretty important.
I can envision this citizen oversight committee being involved in to the extent that your group of people would be involved with those folks to make sure that they understand what they're talking about, what they're going to vote on.
Yeah,
what
I'd
they're gonna
love
make
to be in
recommendations on.
that would be great, just to help out.
In addition to having a strong say in how much of that bond money gets directed at any particular project. Again, I see it as being something that's beneficial to the district, beneficial to the community in so many ways by getting more involvement in our school operations altogether.
I'll just throw one project out there that people have talked to me about too. People all the time tell me, you need to put that bubble on that pool so we can use this thing. And I tell them, I said, well, that's great, but I can't take $60,000 away from the kids to do that, okay? But the other issue, which Robert's painfully aware of, the current covers on the pool are really bad. The last wind really ripped them up. So that is a $15,000 bill we're going to have to deal with. I don't want to deal with that until I know because that's a quarter of putting that top over, and the top solves the problem.
Well, the district is gonna do it together in conjunction with the hospital and the city, right?
We're
That's gonna
trying.
be a third each or
Yeah,
something?
I'm gonna try and squeeze them for whatever I can.
Oh, okay. Well, the hospital, the last time I heard, was interested in sharing.
They are.
The city they weren't certain of their percentage,
Yeah.
but I just was,
Well, let me
That's
just say,
good.
I'm gonna tap whatever resources we can to get it done, but
Good.
I really don't wanna spend $15,000 on pool covers
just.
when we could
spend
spend 60
Yeah.
and solve the problem and have a year-round pool that we could use for PE and everything.
Mhm.
I mean, those are decisions I hope we can hold off until March. In March, we'll know, are we buying pool covers or are we putting something over it?
When you do a culinary class, is that considered a fix and repair of a classroom you already have? Is that why that comes under there?
That's why it's on the list, because I didn't want anybody to say, oh, well, where did we come up with this idea of culinary, because we don't have one. The reason I put it on there is because I've been very upfront about it's the one program we need to add. And it could be literally anything. It's gonna be like most things, it's gonna be a dollar figure decision. Do we get a long-term lease with Adam in town who has the place behind his restaurant?
Mhm.
Brian's fixing a building right off campus here. Do we lease that? Do we spend money to remodel the home ec room? If we do, we need to get a number on that, because my guess is that would be a very large number to remodel that home ec room to get it up to current code. But that's a decision we have to make based on funding and on priority. Where does it fit in the list? If the oversight committee goes, you know what, that's nice to do, we're not doing that till phase 2. We're not doing it till phase 2. But I didn't want to throw any surprises out later on. I put on the stuff that people have talked to me about and I've talked about, so there was no, well, where'd this come from?
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any further?
No, go ahead.
Robert?
I'm glad to hear that everybody's still working together. That's really great to hear during the holiday season. I'm still subbing for principals in other districts around the Lake County and also Ukiah. And so I'm still very much involved in the workings of the schools. And I will tell you that the people who work in the classrooms work so hard, and there's more challenges, and I'm so appreciative. And I am seeing so many more, well, it appears to me, I don't have data on this, but a lot of turnover or beginning teachers, they just get out because the challenges are so great and you have to be very skillful. And I so appreciate what happens in the classroom. And outside of the classroom, I appreciate to see what's going on with the custodial, the maintenance, the clerical in the office, because just like what's happening here, when people are out, they're doing somebody else's job plus their own, and sometimes they're doing 2 other people's jobs. I've seen where 2 positions open, and they're trying to cover it all, and it's just crazy. But nobody understands educators unless you're an educator, and it is hard work, and it really takes some dedicated people. I said all that because I want you to all have a restful holiday vacation or rest, and hopefully you'll be able to gather yourself and come back strong in January. But happy holidays.
Thanks.
Mr. Colby?
Not at this time.
The only thing I'll touch on briefly was Superintendent Westerberg, myself, and Board Member Jeannie King. We met with Assemblyman Jim Wood and his staff at Brookside School a few days ago. We took a tour of the school, and largely this meeting was set up from several months ago in response to an email that kind of tickled these folks because I was highly frustrated with the lack of support that our state assembly has had in supporting the bond measure that you're going to be getting, or the measure you're looking for to get signatures for, that of providing fair and full funding for California school districts, basically bringing us up to a minimum standard of the national average in terms of funding, which In Willits' case, we would boost our budget up to around about 20 to 25% if we actually had that funding. That was, again, equivalent to the national average. So it was a productive meeting. He explained to us that he doesn't sit on any of the education committees. However, we were pretty adamant about pointing out the fact that he knows who does, and that we would appreciate his support in trying to move these kinds of issues forward. He seems very supportive of those sorts of things. We discussed a number of different things that the state legislature could do to help us at all school districts with basically a stroke of a pen. For example, eliminating sales tax for a government agency that realistically, why do we pay sales tax? We take in tax money to pay taxes. Doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a government agency, and a number of other issues similar to that. So it was a productive meeting. I wouldn't expect anything to come out of it tomorrow, but hopefully his influence will make some changes as we move forward. So that's all I've got.
I'll be quick. Winter sports are up and running. Basketball teams are playing, wrestling's up and running. Good participation numbers. One of the things, the calendars we're working on, I'm hoping that in the January meeting I can bring those to you. You know, I don't, like I said, I'm not super vested in where they're at. I know people like to do what they've always done, and you know, my nature is not to do what we've always done, so I'll live with that. It doesn't matter, I would be here whenever we meet anyway. So that'll happen. You got a note today from Trina with all the Christmas programs going on around. I wanted to thank Maria. She put out a really nice note about good things that are going on at Bechtel, and we need to make sure we get that out there and promote that. There's a lot of really good stuff going on there. And we've made significant progress at that school. I'm very pleased with where we're going. My two projects that never seem to end. My project where we're taking that 10 acres behind Blosser and we're trying to rezone that from industrial to R3. I'm now at the phase where we get to do an archaeological study and a traffic study. I'm hoping there's not a Tyrannosaurus Rex bones out there, but you never know. Or an Indian artifact or something, but we're going to have an archaeological study done, and we're going to have a traffic study done. Once those are done, we should get to the phase where we can talk about selling the property and have it rezoned to R3. Now, I know this isn't a shock to anybody. Guess what? There's a bunch of school code on schools selling property. Isn't that a stunner? So we have to have what's called a 7-Eleven committee, and we're not making Slurpees, but this 7-Eleven committee is a group of people that have to come from different areas, a city person, a county person, and a school person. This committee gets together and goes, okay, school board, I think it's a good idea that you sell it. And then once you make that decision, then the property, there's first rights of refusals that go out. There's a whole list of groups that could say, well, we're interested in it. Doesn't mean you give it to them, but they have the first right to buy it. So nothing's ever simple and easy. It's not like we actually own the property and can sell it. We're going to jump through a massive amount of hoops. But I've had nothing but positivity from folks who are going, that would be a great thing to have housing in there. Multi-housing right in town between two schools and a rock's throw from Safeway. It's a great location. We can't take care of the facilities we have. We're certainly not building anything there. And so it would be a good opportunity for us. I'm also working with a gentleman who has an acre behind his house that's attached to us, and I'll probably include him in the process. In other words, he'd be 1/11 of whatever we do. But adding that acre to it just adds to the scope of the project. Our real goal is to get it R3 so a developer would say, oh, you got a flat piece of property right in town. It's a perfect building location with a road that has all the amenities already on it. And so we want to sell it. I don't know what the cost of it is. I have no idea. We're not even close to there yet. But once I get it rezoned, we'll do our 7-Eleven, we'll get an appraisal, and then we'll make decisions. We're not forced to sell anything, but we're at least now in a position where we have something of value to sell. And again, that will help offset, hopefully, some costs we have with fixing facilities. The other project, the gift that keeps on giving, is on Mill Creek. So we have put a 15-foot, basically, fire barrier between the 13 lots that are adjoining our property. But now Fish and Game is involved, and they have really expensive permits that you have to have. And I don't mean like expensive, I mean really expensive permits. And so we had to purchase one of those after the fact, which was quite pleasing. And so now we're waiting for a response from them. I'm hoping it's minimal, but honestly, if you had told me 4 years ago, oh yeah, you guys own the property over here on Mill Street, what are you talking about? It's a long ways from Brookside. Well, it really isn't. It's over the fence and through the creek. And
So basically, Fish and Game has a problem with us taking down those trees that were hazardous.
Well, the permit is that because we're in a watershed area, you have to have the permit anyway. It was our belief that if we didn't get into the flood zone, we were okay. Their intention is if you're 150 feet from the creek, well, 150 feet is halfway up everybody's property on Mill Creek. I mean,
So if you're in the riparian zone, you're quiet.
exactly.
Okay.
So we've done our duty and we continue to work through the process. My goal, once we finish this work and all that, is I would like to do a, they call it a property line adjustment. Essentially, I'd like to let the 13 houses on Mill Creek be waterfront owners. And you do a property line adjustment, it's not an expensive thing, it's basically a paperwork thing with the city. As long as they're amenable, they'll own halfway out into the creek. And they use it anyway. But it's just, we don't want to address this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and keep addressing it. So, although it's been a long process, it needs to come to an end for me.
I agree 100%.
Okay. Oh, by the way, full and fair funding initiative pulled from the 2020 ballot.
No, not surprised.
Yeah, they pulled it because of the split roll property tax initiative. And the feeling is the committee that put the full funding out has said that they don't want two initiatives, pro-education, raising money on the same ballot because they think they'll split the vote. And so they pulled the full funding. Personally, I'd rather they pulled the other one, but because the full funding had a much more solid foundation for me as far as what revenue we'd receive.
Right.
But I didn't get to make that choice, obviously, so that's not going to be on the November ballot, full funding.
Although I don't think it's a done issue, I think they'll regroup after that, the
Right.
split roll.
Right. Well, they may not have a choice. If they get enough signatures, it'll make it on the ballot.
Right. If the split roll would pass, that would maybe change the full funding. But if it doesn't pass, my guess would be they'd say, we're going to go to Plan B. But I think they're making an assumption that putting them both out there would mean that they both would not be successful.
Yeah. Well, it's becoming more and more clear that the legislature is going to have to do something to deal with funding K-12 because they can't keep kicking this can down the road. Sooner or later, this thing's going to collapse.
Yeah.
And we are, like we said before, we are treading water. The last thing I want to see us doing is basically taking salaries out of teachers and CSEA people to put a roof on Blossom. It's not what I want to see. But unfortunately, at some point, that's what we'll be forced to do, unless something changes in the legislature. Because quite frankly, our budget simply will not support literally the millions of dollars in repairs that need to be done to our facilities. It's just, what we have is simply not tenable.
And it's not just Will.
No, it's not just, well, it's probably 90% of schools in the state.
Everybody in our county, when we meet, it's always the same thing about how do we maintain facilities, you know, with no real funding to do it.
Right. So, and maybe one thing, if the revenue that we received had some specific things that were, you know, a certain percentage always goes to maintenance and repair, regardless. But the other part that I find so highly frustrating is, again, the unfunded liabilities. You know, we identified $1.25 million in unfunded liabilities that the state has never paid for and probably never will.
Mandates.
Unfunded mandates. So I find that it's unacceptable.
1,100 of them.
Yeah, and my opinion is really very simple. The next one that comes down, we say, sorry, COD. We're not doing your unfunded mandate. Cash up front. You know. Anything further?
I'm good.
Any public comments on the consent agenda items?
Excuse me, go ahead. Oh, I'm curious about number 4, I have a question.
Okay, nothing from the public? Go ahead, Paul.
Well, my question is, those 3 teachers that are no longer employed, that resigned according to this, they have been replaced, or they
No.
just never came, or what happened that they're so late in November?
2 of them had family issues and moved immediately over Thanksgiving break.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, and one of them chose that teaching wasn't their thing. And no, they are not replaced right now.
They have subs, so they will be replaced, or they are not?
We are
you're not
subbing one of the
absorbing?
positions out. One of them we do not have anybody for. That person did not have a class assigned to them. They were doing teacher support in reading at Brookside. And so, because they didn't have a class assigned to them, I haven't replaced the position yet. So it's going to be really difficult to find somebody, and most likely if I found somebody, I would rather it be an internal person. And then I'd have to take an internal person out of the classroom that they've already established a relationship with the kids in the middle of the year. That would be awkward. But the special education position at Bechtel has retired teachers subbing in it right now.
And
Okay.
budget-wise, so for the remainder of this year, 2 out of the 3, we included salary, like Mark said, you know, we're filling them in some fashion or hope to fill them permanently. And then in next year, all 3 are represented fully in the budget.
The other position is at the preschool, a special education position at preschool.
Oh, okay.
And how that works is there's a preschool teacher and a para, and there's a special ed teacher together. So we're missing that one teacher right now. So they're still functioning, but not like they need to. We actually have an interview next week for that position. But again, I'm always leery about a December hire. The good news is they just got done with school,
Exactly.
and so I'm gonna get a rookie. But
Big percentage of our school district is rookies, so that's, okay. I just was concerned, I hadn't heard about 3 people going anywhere, and I was
Yeah, well,
surprised. Okay.
yeah, I heard about it on my email when I was on vacation. I'm like, you
Yeah.
gotta be kidding me.
That, yeah, sort of set me back, but I'm, okay, thanks. I just need clarification.
Any other comments on the consent agenda? From the board or from the public? Entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Awesome. Oh, excuse me.
Approved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any else? Carries. Item C, approval of final read on board policy 6142.1, sexual health and HIV/AIDS prevention. That was a policy that we had pulled largely due to comments by Director King. And I believe we've made some changes to that policy.
That is correct. We put in there about the mandatory meeting and handing out material and allowing the parents at that point to make an opt-out. But we didn't change what was going to be taught. We were changing what our obligation to notify parents would be.
We're stuck with what's going to be taught. Not necessarily, but I should say in large part,
Yeah.
the curriculum is
Right.
pretty much set in stone.
The curriculum has been already approved by the state of California. It's not optional.
Okay, well, so I had a question about that too. I'm looking for which page. I guess it's number.
It's in the AR.
Oh, no, I've got the thing. I mean, I found, it's not really a page. It's number 14, right after number 14. Well, number 14 is one of them. It says to teach and not or promote religious doctrine, you're not allowed to do that. So I thought that was good. I hadn't seen that from before, I don't know why not. But then the other one says the next page at the top, the district's comprehensive sexual health education and HIV prevention education for students in grades 7, 12, in addition to complying, and I thought I understood that we were doing the K-12 or TK-12, because as you finish reading the rest of it, it talks about how all of it will be cooperatively planned and conducted with in-service trainings for appropriate age groups and inappropriate language and this and that for grade levels and age levels. And I didn't understand why it would make a deal out of 7-12 instead of K-12.
I think if you look at what they're saying there, it's HIV and AIDS.
So that it's
It's
stuck with
specific to
only
that
those?
content.
Oh, okay.
That is a high school content only, or it's a secondary content only,
Okay.
not an elementary content.
And so then in the parts of courses of study, all the rest of that is going to be covered at all grade levels and age levels and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Oh,
The HIV/AIDS has been there for a while.
Yeah.
And it is a mandatory secondary, so middle school, high school, instructional requirement for us.
Okay, so it's mostly that last page that was different, the one in the red about coming 2 weeks in advance,
Yeah.
being notified and all the rest of that.
But at
Which we sort
K-5,
of
we don't
agreed.
teach about AIDS and HIV. That's only at secondary.
Okay. Okay, that was my confusion, I didn't.
I'm correct on that, right, Maria?
Yeah,
Yeah.
secondary issue.
Yeah, it's the wording of what they're saying. You think it's just teaching health because they list those topics, but it is specifically those two things, HIV and AIDS
Well, I must
instruction.
admit, I didn't read all those little links, only one of them, and decided that was enough.
So the key element that we added is at least 2 weeks prior to instruction, parents will be provided information about a parent meeting. The parent meeting will provide details of the curriculum being used, allow parents the opportunity to ask questions, and opt out of instruction for their student.
Yeah, the red part, right?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Very
Yeah.
important.
Not just pertaining to the HIV and STDs, but also.
But to all of it.
All of the curriculum.
Yes.
All of
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then my other part to that is that, has the district kind of put in mind that, God, all of a sudden, it's training, what is that called? Professional development days and things set up? I mean, I hadn't heard of any, and I.
Well, it's different at different grade levels.
Oh, okay, it'll be more
In
like.
K-5, and I know at middle school, you use Planned Parenthood.
Mhm.
And so they already are trained at
Well,
that level.
yeah, oh, okay.
In the high school, it's taught by a teacher, and I have had the conversation with her about she needs to go get in service, and her book is out of compliance, and she needs to find a new text
Oh, okay.
under the ones that are approved.
And so she'll kind of take that on with the support of the district by helping her find in services or paying for them, or she'll just do it all and then show you the bill, so to speak?
No. She'll work through her principal, go to whatever professional development is available, and she'll do the book just like we do all our other books.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we still have a book approval process she has to follow.
Oh, okay.
What's the timeline for that?
Well, as soon as she can get it done. There's all kinds of, after we get a book, we have to basically sit it on the shelf in my office for a month,
Yeah.
and then you can approve it to be used, so. Jennifer's already in the process of looking at the books that are available, and she's looking for in-service that's available.
When does this actually go into effect?
It is already,
So we're required to provide this instruction.
this year.
Okay.
Was K-5 taught by Planned Parenthood as well?
Yeah, I don't remember how they're doing it in Planned Parenthood. Does Planned Parenthood give in K-5 as well?
I don't know, that's never had anything to do with them doing anything at K-5. All I know is that they teach different, they teach 6th grade different and then 7th grade different and 8th grade different. And they also have a training program, by the way, for teachers. And there's one other organization, I can't recall it, that also does training in our area. So it's not something that you have to go far away for. But I don't know whether they have that curriculum or they do that curriculum K-5.
I'm pretty sure when I talked to Nancy, she told me that's who they use too.
Okay.
But I'll verify that.
Okay.
But if not, it'll be the same thing as the high school. Although there's no textbook that goes with it, there certainly is teacher in service that needs to happen to teach the new curriculum correctly.
Any other questions, comments by the board? Entertain a motion to approve.
Item C.
I'll second.
And seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Carries. And we are to Nikki on item D.
The excitement of the evening.
Lots of literature here for everyone if they're interested. So the main discussion, I think, will be starting with page 5 in your packet. This is the multi-year projection, so this allows us to look at 2019-20, 2020-21, and 2021-22. And we are in a different position, I would say, definitely than at adoption. Our enrollment was quite a bit different than what I had been projecting at budget adoption. So we saw an increase of an enrollment this year. I think you guys saw at the last board meeting, the CBEDS comparison data, which showed, I think last year CBEDS was 1516, and this year it's up to 1570 something, I believe. And so the revenue projections here now incorporate a higher amount of ADA than what we looked at budget adoption. We had another funding change as well, which was to our benefit. There is a new, the special education preschool is being funded in a different fashion through the state, and that ended up helping offset some of our special education contribution to probably about $30,000 to $35,000 or so would be my estimate on that. So that was positive for us as well. In addition, as Mark has talked about multiple times, we have been making an effort to identify areas where we can find savings for the budget without impacting people. So when vacancies occur, we are evaluating how to proceed with those on a case-by-case basis. And so there's a few positions that have come off. And I think you guys, they got a list of that, I think, recently. And so those have all been incorporated now into the budget for current and future years. And so ultimately that did help put us in a more stable position, but I would like to point out that we still end up in a deficit spending situation by the time we get to year 3. We continue to face strong increases. The pension costs are going up every year, and that's just going to be an ongoing challenge for us. A change from budget adoption 2 is that at budget adoption, although you guys had come to agreements through bargaining, those, I did not have time at that point to incorporate the increases. So the first interim report does now also include salary increases that were approved in June. And that's 1 year for certificated and all 3 years for classified. So, you know, amongst all of those things, and then with the increases to STRS and PERS, I think that's where we, you know, face pressures, the ongoing costs. And again, you know, in terms of revenue, we're in a situation now with the LCFF where we're getting COLA only increases. So for several years, we were getting what they call the gap funding, where they were trying to kind of move in chunks towards their target funding. And they have achieved what they consider target funding at this point. So in year to year, the only changes that we will see will be based on COLA and on our enrollment or ABA figures.
OCAP got to the 2004 funding level. And so now,
2007 was what
Oh,
they were
whatever.
shooting for. Yeah.
2007 funding level, and so you're good.
Yeah.
And so, but,
Completely dismiss all the inflation that's occurred since then.
and we try not to get too wigged out about 3 years out, but we have to realize that if we do what we do right now, exactly the same way, that is, and the fund revenue doesn't change, that's the outcome.
Right.
And this is based on meeting all our contractual obligations, STRS and PERS going up, some modest increase to what we know is gonna happen with some of our other things, you know, heating, cooling, all that stuff. This is making all those projections based on what we know now.
Oh, and that actually brings up a good point that we had actually just talked about too, is typically I do just a standard CPI increase for utilities, but PG&E is on my radar. I have not made any changes in our budget, but I believe they are going to the Utilities Commission soon to ask for rate increases, and I'm not sure yet what that will look like. So I just kind of want to put that out there, that we may see changes on that come second interim.
According to my superintendent's group, they're asking for a large increase.
Double digits from what I understand.
And thank you for suing us, and we need more money from everybody. So how that pans out, I don't know, but I know that Alex had asked me this one time about what do we really pay in electrical and gas and all that. And I think with all our utilities, we were somewhere around 300.
I have one question that maybe Nikki might be able to find out. So if they increase our price of utility, do they increase the money that we generate from our solar?
I would doubt it, to be very honest with you. So when solar started, where you could sell back, they were allowing customers to sell back, I believe, at a retail rate, and quickly realized that was not beneficial to them.
Okay.
And many years ago, I believe, changed that so that when you sell back, it's at a wholesale rate. And so it already is not tied to the rates we're paying.
Okay.
So I would be surprised if we got any benefit from that. But that's just speculation on my part.
We get less than ideal benefit out of the solar panels as it is.
Oh, yeah.
Largely because of the way that they call their true-up. In other words, we do true-up apparently once a month, according to the PG&E representative that we met with shortly after those things were installed, because it's a commercial, considered commercial, whereas homeowners, they do a true-up once a year. So for us, that true-up once a month is not very good, because June, July, and August, when we have the greatest benefit, or I should say potentially greatest benefit from the sun, they do a true-up at the end of the month. PG&E gets the benefit of all that power. And we're back to square zero again at the end of the month and start over. So for those 3 months, we don't get a great benefit because we don't use that much. But if it was
That's all for
true,
the school year.
Pardon me?
Let's change the school year.
So we can be there to know.
The good news is that, so Jenny and I have been in communication with a company who does analysis on communications billing, and they help identify areas where you're being overcharged, and then for some period of time, they get a fee out of any savings that you have, but the benefit is you have ongoing savings into the future. They do not do PG&E. However, when Jenny asked them about that, the representative thinks that he may have a contact in another company, and so we're kind of following the trail of breadcrumbs to see if we might be able to get some assistance in doing that same type of analysis on the PG&E, including the solar component, because I think everybody knows utility bills are just really, really difficult to navigate and do any kind of real analysis on.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
On this, it's looking like the economic reserve, or the reserve for economic uncertainties, is still running around 13 or so percent, and if you put them, or 12 depending.
Are you looking at
Reserve for economic uncertainties.
9789 object code, the 1,286,000?
Yeah. And I went,
6%
is what's required, no, 3% is what's required, but.
3%.
And so
Mhm.
3% is the state minimum, 6% is what we've always showed since I've been here. I personally would advocate for a higher rate. I believe 6% leaves us quite vulnerable, to be honest, from a cash flow perspective. So in the future, I would like to consider us doing a higher percentage. But when you're looking at what that percentage is derived off, this front page is the unrestricted, but that percentage is against the total unrestricted and restricted. So like if you're dividing it to see what's the percentage, it's actually against,
The unrestricted, I mean the restricted monies as well?
correct, the total general fund expenditures.
Oh, okay.
So you'd be looking at the, on page 9,
Mhm.
you'd be looking at the total expenditures there. That's
Okay.
what the percentage is.
And the
against.
unassigned, unappropriated, that's also part of what can be a part of economic uncertainties, because it's not earmarked,
Yes,
right?
and so essentially the way the components of the fund balance are shown here is we take line D2, the ending fund balance, and it subtracts out these various components until you get to line E2, and that's what remains. So yes, we have a higher fund balance than the reserve for economic uncertainty. That, depending on, if you've looked back through the last few years of budget,
Mhm.
has changed, depending on where we're at in terms of deficit spending. But yes. So did that answer your question?
Sort of. It comes to about, in all then, it's bigger than, 6%. When you put them all together, it's close to about 11 or 12, but you don't count them all together, right?
So when we talk about what is our total reserve, yes, it is higher than the 6%. But we are required in the report to show specifically the
Separate
reserve
out.
for economic uncertainty, because there's that minimum 3%. There's parts of the form where the state checks to make sure you don't fall below the 3%. So that's why it's its own line item. Our total reserve is higher than that, so yes.
Right, okay, so is our total reserve then, that page 9F, the 4 million and something as opposed to the
That
3.7?
fund balance incorporates the restricted. So yes, that is our total fund balance.
Because we're adding restricted and unrestricted,
Yes.
right? And this does too?
But what I would say about that is that any fund, so when you look on page 9,
Mhm.
D3B, restricted, that's 415,000.
Uh-huh.
Restricted funds, I don't think are very useful as part of the fund balance conversation, because most of them are so restricted to particular uses. So it's not money that the board typically can look at to help solve problems. So
It's already earmarked for something.
Right, so then, but we do add it when we're adding the unrestricted and restricted
We
to
are-
make it our budget.
It is the total fund balance, yes,
Oh,
but
okay.
$400,000 of our fund balance are little pots of particular things, Medi-Cal funds or, so it's not, when we're talking about what is our reserve, usable reserve, to me, unrestricted is what we look at, because those are funds that the board has complete discretion with, without being beholden to particular programs.
Oh, okay, so it's back to the 3,786,000
Right.
nearly
Right.
$1,000.
You can't include that in your fund balance because the funds are already spoken for.
Right.
And they're restrictive on what you can do with them. So we have to expend those on only those items. So we couldn't
The
take it and
restricted
move it.
ones.
Yeah.
We couldn't take it and move it somewhere else.
But you have discretion over the 3,000,000, nearly $800,000.
Yes, and I would point out, so the other piece that we identify here is what's called assigned. And so those tend to be still particular to certain funding. So for instance, what I have there is any of the LCAP supplemental concentration grant funds that we have not earmarked yet, the MAW funds if they haven't been used yet. So they're funds that are unrestricted in nature, but still somewhat spoken for in the way we currently have our budget planned. So we still show them separately so that we know those are things we have ideas about what we would probably need to do with them.
And that's about
But they're not,
3%.
it's not restricted in the same way as the other money we talked about.
Less restricted.
They're less restricted.
Less restricted.
We are seeing a trend, under LCFF, there has been a trend where the state is putting things on the unrestricted side of the budget that I personally would argue are not unrestricted. So for instance, transportation sits on the unrestricted side of the budget now. But we know that de facto, that's a very particular program, and that funding gets used
Yeah.
specifically for transportation. And that trend I'm seeing continued with this new special ed preschool funding I was talking about. The language and the way the law was written is very clear that those funds are intended for special ed, early childhood development, and yet they don't technically have them restricted. And so the funds come in on the unrestricted side of the budget. We expend on salaries and such on the restricted side of the budget, and then that money just helps offset the contribution that's going over to our special ed program. So you'll see there are some changes, some rather dramatic changes between when you look at the unrestricted revenue and restricted revenue, because money that used to be coming in on the restricted side now is coming in on the unrestricted side. However, it's clearly being used for restricted purposes. So it's an odd trend I've noticed with the state funding formula.
And again, we don't know what 2 years from now our funding's going to be. We do know 2 years from now what our expenses are probably going to be.
Yeah, fairly close.
Yeah. I mean, we're fairly close on expenses, and it's a shot in the dark 2 years from now what we're going to be funding on. But the good news is we're not in crisis, we're not in massive deficit spending mode, and having to cut and slash and burn.
I think that our ability to be strategic, I think, we talk about that third year and how rarely it looks like what we predict, but it's because we're able to take this time and see what things could look like if we don't make changes, and it gives us that time to make those changes so that we don't just hit a cliff on those types of issues. It gives us time to plan things.
Hopefully we keep getting little bumps in our EDA. That is helpful.
It is very helpful, and I think that's stuff that we've been working towards with a lot of the program building that's been happening.
They'd like to get repaid, but they're going to keep patching the holes.
So I just have one more question about the cafeteria fund.
Yes.
Did that, it looks like it settled itself out. I don't see any,
So when you're looking
Yeah.
at Fund 13, the Form
Yeah.
13, keep in mind that part of what is happening there is we have a contribution that comes over from the unrestricted general fund. So when it balances, as you were saying, it's because we're bringing
Brought
money
in that.
over to balance
Oh,
that.
okay.
So if you are looking at the page 5, the multi-year projection for the unrestricted general fund, where you are going to see the impact of that transfer is on the expenditures section, line 9, other financing, and it's transfers
Oh, the
out.
254, nearly 55,000.
And we did have a position that we didn't fill in that, so at budget adoption, I think we were closer to 288, I believe, so we did make some improvement there since budget adoption.
And that's one of our focuses when we finally get through our audit, that we're gonna get into some ways to reduce cost in food
We
service.
would like to, yeah, to improve efficiency.
But we have to get through our audit first to do that, and we're very close to being done. But it is a source of expenditure that we need to get a handle on.
Okay, but just so I understand this, then on D, which is page 50, when it says interfund transfers, and it's like 200 and almost 89,000, that's kind of what you thought you were gonna transfer over, in reality it was like 250.
Yeah, because you'll see
Or
that
that's somewhere
column
else.
A is the original budget, that's
Oh,
what we did
okay.
at adoption. And then
Over on
column
D?
D is
Yeah, oh, okay.
projected, that's first interim.
Oh, okay, I just didn't get that, okay.
Yeah, it's, the forms are set up a little different than the multi-year projection.
Okay,
They're laid out.
good, okay, thank you.
And entertain a motion to approve the first interim.
Then I make a move to approve the first interim.
I'll second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any nays? Thank you, Nikki. And item E, approval of legal services agreement with Jones Hill.
Jones Hill is Bill Cady, the gentleman who did our resolution for the bond. The reason I brought it to the board is that if the bond were successful, his fees would exceed the amount that I'm able to use as just a sign off on a contract. I believe it was $2,500 for his work he's done so far. But if we are successful in a bond issue, he will have to write all the legal notes for the sale of bonds and the receipt for the sale of those bonds. And so he will have ongoing legal work, and he does it as a flat fee. So you look at his contract, it says in there it's $2,500 for the first time of setup. And if the proposal's successful, then I believe it was $50,000.
52.5.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the legal services that take you through selling and receiving bonds. He's your legal counsel for that.
So it says 52.5 per series of bonds issued.
That is correct.
Is that a 52.5 each time we sell
Yeah,
bonds?
each time you sell them.
So if we do this over a 9-year period or 10-year period and sell
You sell 4 times.
4 times, his fee will be $52,000 basically each time.
That is correct. That is inescapable. And I priced him out with some others, and it's nice to have a flat fee, let's just say that. Because 9 years from now, their costs for doing it will probably have gone up dramatically. Nobody was willing to commit to a dollar figure for 9 years out. And Bill is actually, happens to be semi-retired with them, and this is his wheelhouse, this is what he does. And so,
Well, it's a percentage of $17 million, it's relatively low.
well, yeah, it's just like everything.
There's-
You gotta spend money to get money, unfortunately, and we can't get around not having legal tender bonds to sell, so he's gotta draw it up and do it.
So essentially, with the district's on the hook for $2,500 at this stage.
Correct.
And little or no more until after the bond passes.
Yeah. Yeah, if the bond passes, that's a good expense we're gonna have. You know, not that I like paying it, but you never like paying attorneys, but you gotta do it.
Is this money that gets paid out of bond proceeds?
I thought so.
I believe so.
We can
yeah.
double check that with Adam, but I thought that it
I
was.
can't imagine you couldn't. It is directly related to the use and sale of bonds. Has nothing to do with district operation. So,
And so what happens if in 3 years, the decision is made that the economic growth or whatever is not happening, and so we don't go out and sell bonds? Then
You don't pay
he's at $2,500 that year?
no.
Or he's at
Oh, no,
zero?
no. It's one time 2,500.
Yeah, that was
Oh,
just to
okay.
write up the resolution that you guys saw at the last. time.
Oh, okay.
He wrote the ballot language.
Yeah, no, okay, I understand.
And that's 2,500. He's never gonna charge us that again.
Right,
If we are successful, every time we go sell bonds, he's gonna be 52.
right. And so what I'm saying is if the economic turn is such that we decide not to sell bonds and we're only gonna charge the district or whatever, the $10 a year, or that's what I understood Adam to talk
Right.
about, then he doesn't get 52 grand that year, or? he-
Correct. We did not put out any, it's new bonds. We didn't put out any new bonds to sell. He had nothing to write up.
And he has no cap on the amount of money that there is no cap on the district. I mean, like this time we're selling it for 3 million or something, trusting that it passes.
Right.
Then the next time we go for 0, let's say, and then the time after that, it becomes, well, we probably shouldn't have gone for 0, now we need 6 million, his 52.5 stays 52.5.
It's still 52.5.
It's per issuance because the work he's doing
Is the
has to
same,
be
just numbers.
replicated and done each time you issue. So I don't believe it is tied to the quantity or the dollar amount of funds issued at a given time, just the number of issuances.
Makes no difference on the dollar amount. Anytime we issue a new set of bonds, and that's what that would be, is if 3 years from now, you say, we want to continue the program, or if you want to make it 30 instead of 40, you're still going to issue bonds.
Mhm.
Anytime the district authorizes new bonds, he's 52.
Okay,
Only when we issue new, not every year, only when there's an issuance of bonds. So if we did it every 4 years, every 3 years, that's when his fee would kick in. But it does not kick in on years where we don't issue bonds, and it doesn't kick in at all if it's unsuccessful.
okay. Okay, thanks.
Any further discussion?
Thanks.
Motion to approve?
I move we approve item E.
A second?
Yeah, I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Carries. We have first reads for items F, G, H, and I. So some good bedtime reading, and we are to the organizational meeting.
Well, before, can I ask questions now about F, G, and H, or you just really would rather I wait?
No, give me a go.
Okay, well, on F, it talks about the educational rights for English learners. And then it says, this is one of those deals where it says you need to have a group on the committee that there's a majority of parents or people. Yeah, it's when there's at least 15% that are English language learners in the district, or at least 50 students. They need to have a part of the local control and accountability plan, and there needs to be an advisory committee where the English language learners are, the parents or guardians of English language learners are the majority of the committee. And so, given some of my past experiences where you can't always
Good luck.
get people, exactly. So then, what's the story? I mean, what is,
Better be a small committee.
yeah, okay, are you gonna have 3 people instead of 7 or something? Because you
I don't-
can't,
Yeah, that's a problem.
I think, so currently the elementary schools have been brainstorming about trying to combine with site council and things like that.
Right.
But-
But it, yeah, I mean,
I mean, that's part of the policy that's been in effect.
right, I
The part-
just mostly wanna know what the district does when things don't happen the way they are supposed to.
So I can tell you what happens at Bechtel.
Uh-huh.
We send out sort of a notice, not a notice, but it's actually kind of a vote to our English language, to our Spanish, to our EL parents.
There you go, yeah.
Saying, would you like to serve on the committee? Would you like to give those, sort of those powers to the site council, to be your representative, instead of doing the committee, or, giving them options that way. And most of the time they'll say it's fine, let site council do that.
Oh, okay, well, I went, I forgot to report it, but I went to Brookside's big ELAC dinner, and there were a lot of parents. I mean, we had about 65 or 70 folks that showed up. Okay, the bad news is everyone ate dinner, said hi to their neighbor, and left, okay? There was no, yes, I'll be on the committee, okay? That's really standard from my experiences. And some people, you can sometimes say, come on, I need you to take care of this. And I know that that happened to one person so that they are on site council for Brookside, or is it Blosser, but it's someplace. Anyway, and that's real nice, but she is one. And unfortunately, a lot of times, happens on the PTO too. You get one parent that grew up in the system and was an English language learner, and now they have 27 responsibilities because they're the only one who shows up. Number one, it burns them out. Number two, it's not good representation, okay? It doesn't follow any of the rules. So I'm just wondering what's the plan to help fix it up. But if there isn't one yet, then...
Well, I think that you highlighted one of the efforts. So one of the things that we talk about, with the principals is there are a little bit of funds that we set aside within some of our title money for parental engagement. And so the school sites have tried various things, and things like that, dinner night.
Dinners
and
work,
like
they
that,
just only do that.
are one way to try and engage people. I think that Brookside has done stuff where they'll pay aides extra duty time out of those funds to have childcare during meetings. There's various efforts that have been made, and so I'm not sure beyond that what the answer is, but certainly efforts have been made related to some expenditures and budget planning, so.
Well, Paula's right, it's easy to get them to the meal, it's hard to get them to
It's
sign
hard
on the line.
to sign on the line, exactly. Oh, okay, well, I'll
And
look into that.
it gets worse as you go through. It's
Exactly.
worse at the high school than it is at Brookside.
Oh, I believe that. Okay. I had another question on the supplemental instruction. That's the next one. It had this deal about, okay, well, we know we need to offer help to people, but then it says it may but not required to offer that. So I'm wondering what our district does. It's on page,
What policy are you looking at, Paul?
Supplemental.
the one on I guess, or
Yeah.
G, yeah, thanks. And it says, it was on a page in the, you go through 2 or 3 pages of just a whole bunch of this is where we got it from. And then it
Yeah,
says,
I got the same thing out of it.
yeah. Okay, and so then it says, it's in the middle of, I don't know, supplemental instruction. And it says, supplemental instruction may be offered during and outside the regular school day, including summer, etc. But then it says, when supplemental instruction is offered during the regular day, oh no, that's the supplanting one. Must be another page. Anyway, it was real weird because it said, you have to offer, you should offer, but you don't have to, or something. It was about may, but not required to.
Well, that was, that part you were talking about was.
Oh, that's right on the front with the background. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
The
so-
secondary part was if you can offer it during the school day or after.
That's better,
And
right?
the choices, the district can offer that, but it says supplemental instruction shall be offered in accordance with law and may be used to assist the district in meeting its goals for student achievement. Now, in accordance with law. Now, the question is what's in accordance with law? So this is what we're in depth.
Yeah, and see, the law requires that they get instruction, but apparently it is not required to, it says, since there's no Title I program, okay, you still have to identify kids that need help, but they're not required to offer supplemental instruction. meaning after school, I would imagine. Isn't that what supplemental instruction is?
It can't be.
It can't be.
We
It can't
do
be during
offer-
school days.
Okay,
It's
but then.
just additional instruction above and beyond the regular school day instruction.
So I
Okay,
think
well,
that
what's
pull-out
considered?
programs and things like that also would be considered supplemental.
For example, at Bechtel, she has a seventh period that's
Yeah.
remediation retention. The high school has a course called Guided Academics, which does those things.
Uh-huh.
So there are things within the day, pull-out programs and stuff, but we also offer summer school,
Mhm.
6 through 12, and it's part of the retention program at the middle school and at the high school. That if you are scheduled to be retained, you can redeem yourself over summer school.
But that usually wouldn't be, okay, well, maybe,
That's supplemental instruction.
oh, okay.
Yeah. But that's part of the program at middle school and high school, is to redeem yourself, there's a summer school option.
Okay, and in it doesn't really apply to the elementary schools, is that, I mean, you're supposed to notify people by October 15th or something if you plan to retain them for the following year. And that's a real difficult thing to do, but
Yeah.
assuming you do that, we don't really offer any kind of supplementals then.
Right. In K-5, retention happens very seldom. And when it does, generally there's a parent agreement and it's a decision up front. For example, I'll give you examples at Sherwood. We occasionally have a young kindergartner, generally tend to be males, and we talk to the parent up front and say, you might want to spend your card here and hold them in kindergarten one more year, get them more mature. That's a retention, but we didn't have to do any supplemental because of it. Generally speaking, in K-5, there are a few pure retentions. So
Oh, okay.
the retention part of it's really kind of irrelevant. Very seldom are we keeping a fifth grader back at Blosser.
Okay.
And we have done it a few times. But one other thing, wild card in that, is if they're in special education,
Yeah.
special ed does offer summer school.
Okay.
So,
So it's mostly targeting the upper grades and using academics or whatever
Right.
as the,
yeah, we do most of it through the seventh period at Bechtel and pull-outs and push-ins. The high school does it through guided academics, and, well, we witnessed an after-school, we weren't paying for it,
yeah.
but that would be an example of Matthew is doing math with the students.
K-5, they're doing intervention, right?
They're doing intervention.
Which,
That's not really supplemental, is it? Because it takes away from your instruction in class to pull them and move them all around. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I just didn't quite understand that, but now I get them. Thank you.
no, that's a course.
I'd like to speak to item J.
Sorry, okay.
Okay.
Back to organizations.
Okay. Are we done with first reads?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
At least I won't do this next month, because now I know.
Okay, we are at item J.
I'd like to propose that we postpone item J until we have a full complement of board members.
Don't believe we can do that.
We cannot do that,
Can't do that now.
unless you want a special meeting next week.
Well, I'll say my second part. I feel like our leadership has been excellent with Alex as president of the board, and I'd like to see him continue.
Are you making it in the form of a nomination?
Sounds like it to me. So I'll make a motion that we re-elect Alex Bowles as board president.
You accept the nominee.
I would accept.
Oh, okay.
If,
I'll second.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
I didn't
congratulations.
want him to go Lyndon Johnson on us. Get nominated, I will not serve.
Congratulations, foolish fish.
We're at election of the board clerk. First, I'll ask,
What's that?
are you interested in raising that position?
Yes.
Okay. Nominations, anybody?
Did he say yes?
He's interested, yes.
I'll nominate Bob.
Oh, I'll second it. Oh, people don't second nominations, I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm quaking.
Close enough.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, I don't know.
All in favor?
I-
Aye. And appointment of the board secretary. This has traditionally been our superintendent. Doesn't have to be, but unless there's an issue, I would recommend we maintain this. It's one less thing that we have to do.
It's true.
Got a motion?
I'll make a motion to appoint the superintendent as board secretary.
I'll second.
/ Trina, parentheses, Trina.
Person behind all that work.
Any objections? Discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. And appointment of representatives to school sites. I don't know if everybody's comfortable with where they've been. Paul?
Yeah, I don't really care. I mean, I go all over.
And,
That's what we should
I
do.
think Jean is at Brookside. I've been at the high school.
Sherwood,
I'll just copy and
alternative
paste
school.
from last year, how about that?
Yeah.
Okay. So if there's no, somebody want to make a motion?
I'll move. Is that a motion? Is that a?
I'm assuming so.
Yes.
Is there an assignment to Sanhedrin?
Robert?
Will you do that one too? Okay.
So let's see if there's a motion.
I'll move that everybody will remain assigned as last year.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay. And any specific agenda items for next meeting?
Yes. I do before you. I'd like to have on the agenda the cafeteria policy for who may or may not eat in there and the fees that they are charged. I'm hearing that some days are, you know, a day where people can go into adults can go into the cafeteria and eat for, and are not charged, either that they are employees or they are, I don't know what the deal is, but I'd like to have clarification on what goes on there. I'd also like clarification on the district's policy for having your children come to work with you, and I'd like to discuss security systems.
Okay. We can work on, between Mark and I and you, we can work on getting those, what we can, and some of that stuff,
Oh, okay.
some of that stuff we can address outside of the meeting, I'm sure.
Oh, I'd be glad to do that
Okay.
too.
Okay. And any public comment for items not on the agenda?
Just a very quick one. I received this last week a Kaboom grant, which is from Dr. Pepper and Craig, the coffee maker thing. Is that how you say it?
Keurig?
Keurig? Well, I don't drink coffee, I don't know. And
You were talking about that.
yeah. So anyway, we received a grant from them. It's essentially a matching grant. It's about a 50-50 grant to build another playground structure at Brookside. So,
And it gives us a discount with the vendors too,
Right.
so we'll get better pricing.
right. So we will have an additional playground structure at Brookside.
How much money are we talking?
About 30,000.
Total, so
Total.
our commitment is from
Right.
that.
15?
Yeah.
I don't know if they have enough space out there in that wide open area in the back.
I can put it, you know what I could do? I could put it on the other by the creek.
Yeah, you should
Put
do
it on the other
that.
side of the creek?
Yeah.
It's our property.
On the other side of the creek. Yeah.
We could build a zip line over there to get across, and the
There you
kids
go.
would love that school.
I'll make them want that property. Send the kids over there.
Well,
Do you have a timeline for that?
anytime we get money.
No, we've put in a PO to get it going. I'm assuming it will be in the next month or so. So,
Okay.
and it will be a structure, I had a group and we knew what our dollar figure was. To do the grant, you had to pick they only had 4 vendors to choose from. We chose one of the vendors based on the site council at Brookside, helped pick what they wanted to have for the structure. And so it met the requirements. I did all the paperwork stuff, and I get to do 4 webinars now prior to doing it, and then organize a volunteer group to help put it together.
Well, you don't have much to do anyways, right?
Yeah, I was done for what to
Well,
do.
when the rain slows down, let me know, I'll be happy to help.
I thought you were working every morning at the high school.
Fairly regularly, yeah. But
Yeah.
lately, I've been slowing down because I'm waiting on Brian to get a couple things done so that we can continue.
Oh, okay.
I would entertain a motion for adjournment if someone would be so kind.
I'll still move.
And I'll second. Oh,
Moved,
sorry.
seconded, and multiple seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, this is my.
Huzzah.
Mrs. Lynn?